Hello, I'm Bill Tucker. By any definition, 2016 was a news year that won't soon be forgotten. From Britain's Brexit to President-elect Donald Trump, the establishment sustained some big losses. Over the next hour, we're going to take a look at some of the top stories of the year. A look at the good, the bad, the amusing, and the unbelievable is straight ahead. 2016. It was a year in which Americans elected a new president from two people who infamously were the two most disliked presidential candidates in our history. Perhaps it was because of that there was no patina of any likability, and the campaign was one of the roughest in contemporary times. The cracks in Obama's America fissured wide open, with football players making political statements in support of Black Lives Matter, whose supporters didn't seem to feel as if blue lives mattered, as police shootings rose 50%, in many of those shootings inspired by the anger within the Black Lives Matter movement. White supremacists, once ashamed to show their faces, openly celebrated the candidacy of Donald Trump, even as his campaign disavowed any association with white nationalism. The Clinton campaign suggested any opposition to her ascendancy to the presidency was sexist in nature and branded Trump supporters as deplorable. And the phrase alt-right became an insult hurled by liberals at conservatives, all of which we'll get to in good time. But we start our countdown looking at the emergence of social media as a news and entertainment source. The domain of the one-word star was once only a human affectation, and that changed in 2016. The gorilla Harambe became a celebrity overnight after a small child fell into his enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. Harambe then violently hauled the child through the water, prompting concerns about the child's safety, and Harambe was killed. The ensuing outcry of outrage in social media made it seem as if it would have been better to perhaps let the gorilla maul and maybe even kill the kid.
Oh my God!
Isaiah?
Okay, everybody back up. I think he's trying to speak.
Okay. Mommy loves you. I'm right here.
There was the shocking story of exploding phones. Samsung recalled nearly 2 million Galaxy Note 7s following reoccurring explosions due to the device overheating. 13 people reported burns due to the malfunction. Samsung issued an apology and is now due to lose over $5 billion. Social media also gave us one of the happiest stories of the year. Who can forget this infectious moment? Chewbacca Mom. She gave us some much-needed light and happiness as the Force was clearly with her. And it wasn't just the Force that was with her, the money was with her as well. Her video garnered 150 million views. All in all, the video earned her about $420,000. This is how it breaks down. Department store Kohl's paid her $3,000. That's where she bought the mask. She earned about $7,500 in talk show guest fees. Disney gave her a $7,500 vacation package. She was also given 2 free VIP passes to the Star Wars fan convention in Dallas, and a private college in Florida awarded her 2 kids full college scholarships, all of which more than offset the cost of the mask, which was $30. If you're keeping record, that is a return on investment of 14,000%. I think one of the reasons why it just struck a chord was it was genuine. There's so much that we see that's not genuine. There's so much we see that is posture. There's so much we see that tries to pull at your little heartstrings. And frankly, those things irritate That of me.
There is something very refreshing about something non-scripted, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it's not the same formulaic Hollywood script. You know, and it, you know, to be honest, it is kind of cool to have a Chewbacca mask open its mouth and have it make that kind of Peter Mayhew groan, right? So
exactly. No, it was fun. Presented with the choice of Trump or Clinton, more than 700,000 people chose to write in their own choice for president. Top write-in vote getters were Bernie Sanders, Evan McCullen, Orange County tax collector Earl K. Wood, who died this year, Mickey Mouse, Chicago Cubs general manager Theo Epstein, Batman, and, well, of course, Harambe, the gorilla. The Broadway hit show Hamilton garnered more than its share of tickets and publicity this year. The cast, though, decided they needed to vent their concerns about the incoming Trump administration. They chose to lecture to Vice President-elect Mike Pence and his family, telling them that they expect their administration to serve as leaders of the whole country.
Vice President-elect Pence, we welcome you and we truly thank you for joining us here at Hamilton and American Music. We really do. We are the diverse America who are alarmed and anxious that your new administration will not protect us, our planet, our children, our parents, or defend us and uphold our inalienable rights, sir. But we truly hope that this show has inspired you to uphold our American values and to work on behalf of all of us. All of us.
Well, oddly, it seems as though the cast is not shy of lecturing leaders, but they do seem a little shy in finding a voting booth to cast a ballot. Voting records indicate that most of the cast has never bothered to even vote. We also witnessed the emergence of a new disease to America, the Zika virus. The World Health Organization announced an outbreak of the rare disease, which is spread by mosquitoes and can result in serious birth defects. Its advent saw the return of mosquito fighting efforts in a hope to stop Zika in its tracks, and certainly to stop it from spreading across the entire country. Coming up next, we turn to some of Hollywood's most shocking moments. Welcome back to our look at 2016. 2016 was the year that Brangelina came all undone. It was unthinkable and really messy, with Angelina Jolie refusing to share custody of their children with Brad. She even went as far as to file child abuse charges, which a subsequent investigation found to be totally untrue. Tabloids were the real winners in the couple's tragedy, as they resurrected stories of a tortured Jennifer Aniston ready to bolt for Brad if, he would only bolt for her. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the real heartbreak of the year. I mean, it's going to be difficult for me to do this without crying, because Brad and Angelina, they're broken up. What are we going to do?
This was, you characterized it correctly, Bill, in my view, a heartbreaker if ever there was one. But, look, God bless them. To me, I think it speaks more about the state of the American media.
Well, that's the only thing it speaks to, is the state of the media.
This many people care about this. I mean, it really, to me, was not that significant of a story. I've had relationships that haven't gone so well. I would imagine maybe you've had relationships that haven't gone so well.
Mine have always been perfect.
Naturally. So I'm learning from the right guy.
In early October, news broke that Kim Kardashian had been robbed in Paris at gunpoint while staying in a high-end luxury apartment building. How did that ever happen? The thieves made off with $10 million worth of jewelry and left Kim Kardashian traumatized. And Kim's trauma, reportedly, led to a confused Kanye West, who didn't have Kim to lean on as he toured. In late November, he canceled his San Pablo concert tour and was hospitalized in the psych wing. So the man who earlier in the year tweeted for money from fans as he pled bankruptcy, into the year, it seems, headed right back into bankruptcy.
If I would have voted, I would have voted on Trump.
What?
Mr. Trump, Kanye, what did you guys discuss in your meeting today?
Just friends, and he's a good man.
Did you
Doing
discuss
well.
possible
Long
cabinet
time.
positions?
We've been friends for a long time.
Did you guys discuss inauguration?
Life. We discussed life.
You know, halftime acts are hardly newsworthy items unless you are Beyonce and you make a statement in support of Black Lives Matter, pro-Black Panthers and anti-police, and you do it looking like she looked and her costume dancers looking like they looked. Who knew that a political statement could ever look so sexy?
Do you care about the halftime show? Coldplay, Bruno Mars, and Beyonce.
I care deeply about
Yes.
the halftime show.
Yes.
Deeply.
Genius.
I got
She released
dressed
a new
for the
video
halftime
yesterday.
show. I hope
Genius that
Beyonce
she
likes
released
what I
it.
have
Yes.
on.
Coming up, the U.S. dominated the 2016 Rio Olympics. We'll have more of that when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Bill Tucker. And now to one of the biggest international sports events of the year, the 2016 Rio Olympics. The U.S. dominated the Summer Olympics, ranking first with a total of 121 medals, of which 46 were gold. Michael Phelps retired after winning another 5 gold medals and 1 silver. That leaves him with a total of 22 gold medals in his career, the most gold ever won by any Olympic athlete ever.
Looking back at, the 2+ years that I spent training, I don't have anything else that's left. I have a future ahead of me that I'm looking forward to with growing a family and teaching more kids to be water safe, growing the sport of swimming. I mean, the list is endless of things that I want to do. It's the last time you'll ever see me in the water racing again, and I think after the relay last night, that's why I was, kind of hunched over and more emotional than I was in London.
The U.S. team, dubbed the Final Five, took home the gold medal for the women's gymnastics team final. The Final Five star, Simone Biles, became the most decorated American gymnast of all time. And Simone Manuel made history by becoming the first African-American female to win an individual swimming medal. Ryan Lochte, he cast a pall on the games, claiming that he was the victim of an armed robbery in Rio. However, it became clear that Lochte was not quite telling the whole truth. Details of the incident are still not 100% clear, but in any case, it resulted in a 10-month suspension for Mr. Lochte and the loss of millions of dollars in potential endorsement. 2016 was also a year that political activism came to the sidelines of the NFL games. Multi-millionaire San Francisco 49er quarterback Colin Kaepernick inspired other multi-millionaire players to protest against the police and America by disrespecting the national anthem.
He's exercising his constitutional right to make a statement. I think there's a long history of sports figures doing so. I think he cares about some real, legitimate issues that have to be talked about. And if nothing else, what he's done is he's generated more conversation around some topics that need to be talked about.
And of course, no review of 2016 would be complete without a mention of the Chicago Cubs. Singer-songwriter Steve Goodman wrote them a song, but he died long before he saw his beloved Cubbies play in a World Series, much less win one. After a long 108-year drought, the Cubs once again became baseball's world champions. Unfortunately, 2016 had its fair share of dark moments as well. Several terror attacks executed on American soil as well as Black Lives Matter fueled tensions and violence against the police. We have more on that coming up. Welcome back to our review of 2016. On March 22nd, Belgium suffered 3 terror attacks, 2 at the Brussels airport and 1 at a metro station in central Brussels. 32 civilians were killed and more than 300 injured. ISIS claimed responsibility for the attacks, which were and are the deadliest terror attacks in Belgium's history. On June 12th, Omar Mateen committed the deadliest terror attack in the United States since 9/11. Mateen, a 29-year-old security guard, walked into a gay nightclub by the name of Pulse in Orlando, and he began shooting club goers. He killed 49 people, wounded 53. He then called 911 and swore his allegiance to ISIS.
Our nation stands together in solidarity with the members of Orlando's LGBT community. They have been through something that nobody could ever experience. This is a very dark moment in America's history. A radical Islamic terrorist targeted the nightclub, not only because he wanted to kill Americans, but in order to execute gay and lesbian citizens because of their sexual orientation. It's a strike at the heart and soul of who we are as a nation. It's an assault on the ability of free people to live their lives, love who they want, and express their identity. It's an attack on the right of every single American to live in peace and safety in their own country.
On June 28th, 3 attackers armed with automatic weapons and explosives walked into Ataturk Airport in Istanbul, Turkey, and they executed a multiple simultaneous attack, killing 45 people, injuring over 230, and Turkey claims that the assailant had ties to ISIS. Has this been the worst year for Islamic or terrorist-inspired activity?
Well, I mean, ISIS has definitely promoted itself and carried out attacks more than they did in past years.
Right.
Whereas you had Al-Qaeda dropping, you have ISIS rising. So you hear less about Al-Qaeda and you hear more about ISIS. Is it a good year for ISIS? No, because we are defeating them every single way, and they now seem to be more on the run in Syria and Iraq than they were before, but we're still not there. As Jonathan and I both will agree, ISIS, to defeat ISIS, we have a long way to go. Law enforcement in this country is doing everything that they can on a daily basis to keep the people of this country and people visiting here safe. But we still, even in the law enforcement area, have a long way to go.
No, I agree with that, but it seems to me that if they're on the run, Tom, they're running here, because you can look at domestic acts here. The Pulse Club down in Orlando would be a good example of it. You know, just recently, the guy at the Ohio State University campus who pulls his truck, runs into people, gets out, and starts stabbing people, clearly terrorist inspired. So that if he's right, they seem to be running here. Do you think agree?
Well, I don't know if we can actually say we have ISIS on the run. I think maybe we're going a little bit of a stretch there. I think right now, what we've seen over the past year is the biggest changes in their ability to grab land in the Middle East because of what's going on in Syria and the proxy war there, and what happened in Iraq, where we kind of started pressing them in certain areas. They've actually retreated on some of their land grabs. But where they've still continued to excel is online recruiting and spreading the Islamic message.
On July 14th, a Tunisian resident of France by the name of Mohamed Boual drove a 19-ton cargo truck into crowds celebrating Bastille Day in the city of Nice, France. He killed 86 people and injured 434. France's president, Francois Hollande, extended the country's state of emergency, which had been in effect since the 2015 Paris attacks.
France is America's oldest ally and one of our strongest. We owe our freedom to each other. Americans and French have stood together for 2 centuries, and I told President Hollande that we will stand united now in our grief, in our praying for the many who are injured, many of whom are still fighting for their lives, and we pledge to stand with our French friends as we defend our nations against this scourge of terrorism and violence.
Between September 17th and September 19th, New York and New Jersey suffered multiple explosions which left 31 people injured. The FBI identified Ahmad Khan Rahimi as the sole assailant and captured him shortly after the attacks.
We are living in a time, we better get very tough, folks. We better get very, very tough.
Rahimi was allegedly influenced by the extremist teachings of Al-Qaeda's bin Laden.
You're always going to have the danger in any country that something like that could happen. How do you get on top of it is the major question.
People are already fundamentalized, and it's very easy for jihadist groups to reach in and pull people out. What I think we need to get to, and what we have not done this year, is people keep saying we need to use the term radical, but we don't need to use the term radical. We need to look at who the enemy actually is, and that's where we failed.
Now we turn to police shootings. Here is a shocking number. At least 61 law enforcement officers were shot and killed during 2016. On July 7th, a gunman killed 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, one of the worst days for American law enforcement in history. Many claim that Black Lives Matter protesters have fueled much of the tension and the violence against law enforcement over the past year. I want to get into the other side of the terror, which we've seen this year with Black Lives Matter. And we've seen a lot of terrorist activity inspired by that movement. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been aimed at police. We've had 60, as we're having this conversation, there have been 61 police in this country killed by this anger. Is this, Tom, you spent your years in law enforcement, you were a New York City cop. This has got to be chilling to you on a couple of different levels, and what do we do about that?
Well, we have to give the police better equipment and protection. We have to stand by our police. We have to have our government officials voice the rhetoric that's going to support our cops, not send representatives from the White House to the funeral of a guy who robbed a store, tried to take a cop's gun, and was killed because he was fleeing a robbery and happened to be stopped by a brave police officer. And that's who you send White House officials to. You need a White House now and government officials who are going to stand by the people who stand by us, who protect us on a daily basis. Everyone who wears the blue uniform and is a security guard or protects some of our infrastructure has to be protected not only by their commanders and their police officials and government officials, but also by the White House.
Do you think Trump certainly set that tone during the campaign? Do you think he was genuine in terms of sending the message that he will be the law and order guy, the guy who stands with the police?
I think he will, and I hope he sticks to that, because that resonated with a lot of people more than just conservatives. But I think one thing that you started out with this part of the interview, you labeled terrorism to Black Lives Matter. And that's very important, because people have to realize terrorism is a tactic. I've said it on this network before. It is the use of fear and intimidation for a political aim, right? So that's what Black Lives Matter is, and we have to get away from, in this country, what we've been doing for over the past year, which is calling people protesters when they're actually terrorists. And that's a big problem, because what happens is you're limiting law enforcement from doing their job. As Tom was just talking about, law enforcement needs better equipment. They need upgraded tactics from what they used to have. You know what happened in Orlando, where we had officers in there, instead of pushing forward, we pulled them out and waited for negotiators with somebody who's committing a terrorist act. It's not going to work. But by and large, I think the biggest problem is that we have administration officials, not just in the White House, but in city and state government and in law enforcement, that refuse to acknowledge what terrorism actually is and differentiate that from protesters just because they don't want to get into a heap of political trouble.
Two points based on Jonathan, which are very good points. The 2 points I have is, as a former law enforcement person, you can't allow any demonstration to get out of hand and burn down someone's store. That man has worked for that store, and as law enforcement and as government officials, you have to stop it. In North Carolina and Baltimore, we watched the opposite. We watched the mayor of Baltimore allow the police to stand by as stores were burned. That's the first point. And the second point is you have to give the police the equipment that they need. And when I say that, we had a White House who stopped military-grade equipment, surplus, being given to police departments to protect the cops at times like that.
Because of an image.
Because of an image problem. That's surplus military equipment that police departments can use, and they should be given it.
There were 2 major plane crashes this year that made the headlines. In May, Egypt Air Flight 804 from Paris to Cairo crashed over the Mediterranean Sea, killing all 66 people on board. Then on November 28th, Lamir Airlines Flight 2933 crashed in Medellin, Colombia, with Brazil's largest and most successful soccer club on board, killing 71 people. Up next, a political season for the record books, and the answer to the question, what do Trump, Clinton, and Mickey Mouse have in common? Welcome back. I'm Bill Tucker. 2016 will perhaps be best remembered as the year that Donald Trump was elected president.
As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. It's a movement comprised of Americans from all races, religions, backgrounds, and beliefs who want and expect our government to serve the people, and serve the people it will.
It was the 2 most detested people in America running to be our leader, and we got a quote-unquote shocking result. We had Donald Trump be president-elect. Ben, looking back over the year, is this a surprising result to you? Are you shocked to see that Donald Trump is going to be the next leader of the free world?
Well, look, it's certainly, I mean, unprecedented is probably the most overused word in the media, but it is pretty unprecedented for someone who has literally never held an office to become president of the United States. And I think there are 3 themes. I'm going to come up with some sweeping generalizations, and you can try to knock them out.
Earlier, to provide context, I was saying that you like broad sweeping theories, and I'm more pragmatic. So you get a good mix.
We'll let the audience judge.
Right.
So there are, I think, 3 things about it that make it kind of shocking in some respects, but also make sense that the same country that could elect Barack Obama could also elect Donald Trump. The first is a revolt against the elites and a resentment of the elites. The second is the pendulum swinging back against political correctness and identity politics. People have said enough is enough. And then the third thing is the notion of a national interest-oriented set of policies. In other words, let's put the interests of our citizens before anyone else. Those 3 themes clearly mattered. They were palpable for folks both on the left and on the right, and we'll see if this is just the pendulum swinging back against Barack Obama or actually a sea change in not only U.S. politics, but world politics.
And let me say what I think are my more pragmatic theories about why he was elected. First, he ran on a platform of change, and I think that it's very simple. As long as you're going to promote change, you have a really good chance of winning in this country. Next, he spoke simply, and I think that's something that was underestimated and underemphasized, is that he had the ability to connect with people in a way that he was criticized by the media for speaking so simply. But think about the demographic that he was able to reach, people who could process what he was saying and get engaged. You know, unlike Ben Weingarten, who speaks in these grandiose
I
theories.
read your stuff, don't worry.
So after I run for office, we'll see if that proves true.
Right. And then he had a targeted message. You know, he didn't just go from place to place and say, these are my policy platforms.
Yeah.
He went to speak with steel workers who were worried about being laid off. He said, I'm going to get you jobs. I'm going to ensure that you keep your jobs. And we saw he even has started getting to work with the carrier employees, trying to, you know, ensure that they're not laid off. So I think those are some things. But I think what's really positive out of this whole experience is that myself, I've never been more engaged in the political process. I wake up every single morning, what is Donald Trump doing today? Whether you like him or you hate him, that's something that he's brought to America, is engagement across the board.
It was also the year of Brexit, when the British people voiced their frustration at the well-oiled machine called the British establishment and voted to leave the European Union to halt immigration into the country. The very same anti-establishment sentiments were felt all the way across the pond, as they say, here in the United States as well, ultimately leading to Trump's victory. There was an anti-establishment rise all across in Europe. We saw, you know, Britain go Brexit. More recently, we saw Italy reject the changes in globalism in Italy. We are now seeing German Chancellor Merkel start to shift her position on immigration and certain cultural issues because she realizes she's unleashed a kind of beast that's going to put her out of power as well. This kind of leans forward looking to 2017, but I'm wondering how much power you think that those forces might actually have been.
Well, I think that in the issue of Europe and immigration, refugee crisis, but also assimilation of folks from majority Islamic nations for the last 2, 3, 4 decades, that is going to be a long-term trend. Something that Mark Stein and many other folks have been talking about for over a decade, about how essentially Europe could reach a tipping point demographically and ideologically where it becomes a fundamentally different place. And I think one thing that I've argued in the past, and I think that we're starting to see it, is that you have native Europeans and then immigrant Europeans who are choosing not to assimilate. The immigrant pool is growing, the native pool is shrinking. They have essentially declining birth rates. There's going to be a time where that reaches a tipping point, and you have to ask whether Europe is still Europe. I think part of this reaction is individual European nations saying, our heritage is basically being, not heritage, but our ideology is essentially changing as a nation, and we don't necessarily like it. We don't necessarily like the cultural shifts. Meanwhile, you have an EU body that's essentially saying, here are all the things you should believe in, and here's our multiculturalist agenda and the like, being foisted down upon them. And so naturally, I think that's going to create conflict, and that is certainly only going to grow in the years ahead.
Well, I mean, it's something that's definitely something that's an effect here in the United States. I think a lot of people feel like there is change happening. But I think, Amy, we're better at acculturating immigration and immigrants into the country. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think the EU was formed after World War II based on this theory of cooperation to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And as we've evolved, the EU, the infrastructure, the laws have not. So anytime you have that type of cultural evolution like you're talking about, but not a structural evolution, there's going to be people who revolt against it. And I think it's a real reflection that 30 million people came out to vote, and the majority of Britain wanted to exit. I mean, these are the people speaking, so that's a very strong message.
But there was a staggering amount of other memorable moments and political scandals over the course of the year. There was Hillary Clinton becoming the first female presidential nominee by the Democrat Party in American history, and very nearly the first Madam President. However, Mrs. Clinton had no shortage of scandals, and while she rigorously campaigned across America, an FBI investigation was being conducted about her handling of classified information. In July, FBI Director James Comey announced he would not be recommending charges against Clinton in the email scandal. But it did not end there for Mrs. Clinton. The investigation reopened following the discovery of more mishandled emails during Anthony Weiner's sexting scandal, of all things. In addition, allegations regarding possible pay-for-play with the Clinton Foundation during Clinton's term as Secretary of State sparked concerns that in the event she won the presidency, she might actually be indicted.
This is bigger than Watergate.
Judge, did you wipe this earth?
What, like with a cloth or something?
I don't know. Well, no. How it works.
The Donald, characteristically outspoken on the Twitter sphere, got into a feud with Fox News' Megyn Kelly after she grilled him on some of his statements about women during the first Republican presidential debate.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
The two did make nice when Donald appeared on her show for a one-on-one interview. Throughout 2016, the liberal media bashed Trump at every turn, obsessively reporting on his every move, overlooking Clinton's shortcomings, and even going so far as to endorse her. Trump, they said, had no chance against Hillary. Well, the media was wrong. Hillary Clinton and the media lost their battle against Donald Trump, which did lead to some in the media confessing that they admittedly, quote, have a great deal of soul searching to do.
This is painful, and it will be for a long time. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do, then we must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
Earlier, we mentioned the Anthony Weiner scandal. The disgraced New York congressman continued to appear on our television screens amid reports that Weiner sent various women inappropriate texts for the umpteenth time, leading to his eventual split from Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin.
Oh, God. Oh. Anthony Weiner. I should not comment on Anthony Weiner. I'm not a big fan.
And here at Newsmax, we kept a close tab on the Bundys, the Nevada ranchers who led an occupation of a wildlife refuge in Oregon, leading to a standoff with authorities. The siege in Oregon ended with the killing of Lavoy Finicum and the Bundy brothers, Ryan and Ammon, along with their companions, being jailed and denied bail. After 10 months in federal custody, all of the defendants were found not guilty. Ammon and Ryan are now back in Nevada in jail, awaiting trial on charges stemming back to 2014. Up next, after our review of 2016, we want to hear what you think about what we may be looking at in 2017. And we'll get some answers from our guests as well. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We've reached the end of our review of some of the top stories of 2016. Now we turn our attention to what might lie ahead in 2017. I asked our guests what they see as possibly developing as big stories in the coming year. Here is what they had to say.
My political prediction is that a lot of change is going to happen up on Capitol Hill, just based on what we've seen Donald Trump do so far, that he's already getting to work, even on Thanksgiving, trying to help with the whole carrier employment situation. So whether you like it or not, I think a lot is going to happen.
In terms of politics, I think you're going to see a rare bipartisan movement. I don't know if it's going to happen by the end of 2017, but I suspect that it may, to impeach Donald Trump. And you pick the excuse. You know, there's always an excuse you can use to impeach a president. But I suspect that Congress, Republican and Democrat, you were going to see them rushing to impeach Donald Trump and replace him with Mike Pence.
I think 2017 will bring more support for law enforcement. We'll understand that law enforcement officers need the support of the public. Hopefully the administration will be the voice of that support.
I think that the American people, starting with them after the Trump election, have an opportunity to really unify. However, if we look at where I think the biggest national security threats lie, they started in 2016 with the election process. I think they're going to continue to grow in 2017.
The media will learn nothing from the 2016 election cycle. They will continue to double and triple down on the same things that failed them because they can't see past their ideology, and they don't understand that forcing their opinion on others is going to continue to hurt them.
Well, that's nice, but what do you think? Let us know your 2017 predictions on newsmaxtv.com/comments. And go to our Newsmax Facebook page. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a wrap here for 2016, and it has been, I think we can all agree, one heck of a year. I'm Bill Tucker.